Doll and Small Collection, Season 2, Chapter 31, From Fun to Fright. Ashlynn woke the next morning to the sigh of Soren, her 4.5-inch tall boyfriend, sleeping soundly beside her. The indent he made on the pillow was nearly imperceptible, but the impact he made on her heart was larger than life itself. The boys had a sleepover with Hero and were out in the living room. There was no sound, even as the clock flipped over to 11 o'clock, meaning the boys were probably still sleeping. Maisie, on the other hand, was staring up at the ceiling, chewing on her fingers happily. The borrower toddler had a sixth sense for when Ashlynn was awake, and, naturally, she tended to the child. She tidied her up quickly and pulled off a minuscule piece of a granola bar she had in her purse, though the toddler merely sucked on her small fragment. It wasn't until Soren stirred that Ashlynn dared approach and kiss him tenderly on his chest. The warmth of his smile as he opened his eyes spread through her whole body. "Morning," he muttered sleepily as he rubbed his eyes with his knuckles. "Well, looks like you slept well," Ashlynn teased, daring to tussle Soren's bedhead. He rolled his eyes and took the taunt with a wink. "If it looks half as good as yours, then I'll take that as a compliment," he said. Stretching, he stood and hopped down onto the squishy mattress below, catching himself with his cat-like reflexes, and walked toward Maisie. "Good morning, sweetheart." Maisie cooed and uttered "morn" before continuing to suck on her breakfast. He sat on the bedspread across from Maisie and began combing through her wavy brown hair, kissed with the slightest auburn with his fingers. "Dirty dust bunny," he muttered. "You need a bath today." "Why don't we go ahead and do that before the boys get up?" suggested Ashlynn. Soren paused for a moment and looked up at Ashlynn. "Why?" inquired Soren. "We're not doing anything else today, are we?" "Actually," said Ashlynn. She bit her lower lip and averted her eyes momentarily. She had an idea of something she wanted to do with Soren for a while now, but had only worked up the courage to bring it up after seeing the boys have such a good night yesterday. "I had something in mind." "Oh?" asked Soren, as he subconsciously wrestled Maisie into his lap so he could continue combing through her hair. "Yeah, I was thinking that you and I could do something tonight," said Ashlynn, laying on her side with her head resting on her propped-up hand. Soren's quirk of a smile broadened as he eyed Ashlynn. "I think I like that idea. What did you have in mind? Rooftop?" asked Soren. Ashlynn shook her head. "No, something a little more daring," said Ashlynn, running her fingers through her hair. Eyes narrowing, Soren guessed again. "A picnic in the park?" Ashlynn shook her head again. "Well, I'm out of ideas. Going out in public for a picnic is pretty bold," stated Soren, reaching up and scratching his scalp. "Well, it is out in public," said Ashlynn. "I want to take you to the movies." Soren's eyes widened as he stopped mid-scratch to look her in her stormy blue-gray eyes. "Really?" asked Soren. His heart had skipped a few beats, and only when he saw that Ashlynn, unblinking, was serious did he swallow dryly in response. "Public? Ashlynn, that's dangerous." "I know, but I've thought it through already. I'll wear a hoodie so you'll be hidden. I'll put you up in my hood by my neck so no one will see. Plus, it'll be dark," said Ashlynn. The thought of leisurely watching a movie at home was a delightful one. The thought of being out in public and possibly being seen or glimpsed was quite the opposite. Would he even be able to relax, enjoy the date with Ashlynn, with his sixth sense, which detected humans going off in the back of his head? His thoughts swirled around, but a quick, blushing kiss to the top of his forehead snapped his mind back to the moment. "Please," said Ashlynn softly. "I promise we'll be all right." The earnestness in her voice and twinkle in her eyes was what pushed him over the edge. "Okay, we'll need to prep the boys, and Maisie, but..." Soren was interrupted by another one of Ashlynn's heart-racing kisses to the top of his head. "Thank you," she breathed. Without another word, she whisked herself out of the bedroom to get the bath ready for Maisie. While Soren still had some minor reservations, it was worth the risk to see her happy. The rest of the day practically flew by with chores and conversation. Maisie's bath was an eventful venture, to say the least. She was initially stubborn because there were no bubbles, but then was uncertain of them when Ashlynn added just a little too much bubble bath solution to the sink. Then she refused to get out without popping every bubble. After, everyone congregated in the living room, where the boys finally were stirred awake by the sound of Ashlynn and Soren making breakfast, which was French toast. They worked on some of Ray's inventions and played a few more games before hinting that they needed to finish up some chores. Hero went home shortly after lunch, talking non-stop about the movies and how amazing the night was, thanking Ashlynn, Soren, and Ray profusely as he left. The moment Hero left, Soren and Ashlynn told the boys that they were going to be going out for the evening and that the boys would be on their own for the rest of the night. "What? What do you mean?" asked Ray, folding his arms and staring at Soren. "Why can't we come? What are you going to do?" "Ray, they're going on a date," muttered Dorian, giving him a playful punch on his shoulder. "Well, we've gone on those with you before. The picnic, remember? We won't be a bother. We'll be quiet," pointed out Ray. "Sorry, Bobbins, not this time," grinned Soren as he playfully ruffled his brother's hair. Despite Ray's protests, the only thing that Soren and Ashlynn allowed was for the boys to know they were going to the movies. "What? The movies? Now we have to come," argued Ray. "We're previewing the movie," stated Ashlynn. "It's a little mature for both of you, and certainly for little Maisie. We'll talk about letting you watch the first one after we see this one. It's the fourth movie in a series about a guy who is kind of a secret agent, but for bad people." With a pouting lip, Ray eventually relented with the promise that they would all get a chance to not only see the movie, but also make it to the movies one of these days. The evening was finally free, and, after dinner, Ashlynn came out of her room dressed in simple black pants, a crop-top white shirt, and a snuggly-looking black and white plaid print coat that looked kind of like a poncho with a hood. Soren, speechless, looked at her in awe. Beautiful, inside and out. "Ready?" she asked, holding out her hand. He nodded and kissed the boys and his daughter on the head before stepping onto Ashlynn's outstretched fingers. "We'll be back soon. You have the emergency number on the phone on the couch. Everything you need is there, and if you need us to come back early, give us a ring," said Soren, as Ashlynn pulled him away. "Bye, Soren, have fun," the boys shouted, as Ashlynn slipped their brother into the front pocket of her jacket. Hard in his throat, Soren leaned against Ashlynn's fingers and tried to breathe calmly, as he felt the slight jostling of Ashlynn as she walked to the elevator. The doors clattered open, and she stepped inside. In a low voice, she addressed Soren thoughtfully. "They'll be okay," said Ashlynn. "They've been on their own before, and we won't be gone for long." "I know," said Soren after a moment. "It's just, I haven't done this in a while. Leave them on their own, since..." "I know. And it's going to be all right," reassured Ashlynn. "We're going to go, have a good time, and it's going to be fun, okay? Remember that. We're going out to have fun. Ashlynn curled her hand ever so slightly to cup Soren's form. He reached his arm up and around her thumb, leaning against her appendage and squeezing hard to make sure she knew he was listening. Ashlynn grew quiet as she walked out of the elevator to the parking garage, where Soren was able to slip out and secure himself onto her right shoulder for the remainder of the ride. It was an enjoyable ride. Letting themselves relax, they sang along to the radio and laughed at some of the radio stories they heard, wondering how people could be so ridiculous. They pulled into the parking lot of the movie theater, where, for the first time since they got into the car, Soren fell silent. Before him was an endless sea of cars, each usually accommodating 1 to 3 humans. Seeing so many cars suddenly made Soren squirm. It was nerve-wracking to be out in the open with so many humans nearby. And any one of them could easily spot him and address it to Ashlynn. Or worse, their phones could take pictures of him and Ashlynn together out in public. His nerves felt tangible, his body shuddering involuntarily as he stared at the towering building in front of him. Ashlynn reached up with her left hand, obviously sensing his tension, and touched his legs with her index finger. "Ready?" she asked. Taking a moment, he breathed deeply and nodded. "Yes," he said. "Hey," muttered Ashlynn, turning her head and bumping her shoulder, making Soren lose his spot. He slid off of her shoulder into her left hand, where Ashlynn held him out so she could look him in the eyes. "I love you. I love your courageous heart, and that you try so hard for me." With that, she pulled Soren close and kissed his chest. Soren sank into her hand, letting her soft lips press into his torso. Could she feel his racing heart? Could she sense how much she meant to him? Did she know how much it meant to him that she was trying so hard? None of the words could form, and instead, Soren kissed her back, letting his hands rest on either side of her lips. She pulled away and smiled. He thought about protesting, but instead nodded and managed a few simple words before Ashlynn slid him back into her pocket. "I love you too." Ashlynn was careful on her walk into the theater and made sure at every turn that no one could glimpse into her pocket. Soren, on the other hand, managed to see everything happening from his vantage point. He saw the oddly colored carpet and smelled the stale popcorn and candy. Their seat was at the very back, so no one could see Soren as Ashlynn fished him out of her pocket, pulled up her hood, and set him on her shoulder just inside the hood. Hiding just behind her ear, the two of them sank into comfort and watched the movie unfold. Personally, there was a lot for Soren, and he didn't understand all of the references, but the man on the screen, who was the, as Ashlynn said, secret agent, was certainly flexible and moved with the agility of a borrower, twisting and dodging even the most impossible task. Ashlynn waited for everyone to leave before daring to snag Soren back from his perch and sliding him into her pocket once again. The trip home was filled with discussion about the movie and whether or not Ray and Dorian would be ready to watch these kinds of movies. Ultimately, they decided they would censor some of the violent and naughty clips, but the overall concept was acceptable. They were in the elevator and stepping out into the hallway just outside the apartment when Ashlynn's phone began to ring. She glanced down at the number, which Soren managed to glimpse, and saw it was Dorian calling. "Dorian? What is he calling for?" asked Soren quietly. His heart began to pound. What was going on? Something was wrong. They wouldn't have just called to check in on the two of them. "Ashlynn?" "Got it." Ashlynn quickly fished out her keys and slid them into the lock. She hurriedly swung the door open, stepped inside, and closed it, both listening closely as they entered. Both of their hearts sank, as they heard a ferocious shout from the kitchen counter. "Get off of me!" It was Ray. Ashlynn hurried forward into the kitchen, jostling Soren, who she had taken into her hand, and rounded the corner. As Ashlynn flicked on the light, she immediately saw red. Someone, a borrower, had a hold on Ray's leg and was dragging him across the counter. Blood was dripping from the guy's nose, and the moment the light was on, both of them froze. Soren recognized the borrower immediately as one of his assailants. Ray, taking advantage of the opportunity, kicked the borrower hard in the knee and was free in an instant. Ray scurried away, tripping over himself as Ashlynn set Soren down on the counter. Before he could say anything, Soren watched as Ashlynn's hands descended around the stunned borrower, snatching him off of the counter with incredible speed. In this moment, Soren once again remembered why humans were so dangerous, as he watched the borrower dangle from Ashlynn's grasp, high above his head.